Good evening. There is a specific kind of quiet that descends upon an authoritarian regime just before the floor falls out. It is not the quiet of peace, and it is certainly not the quiet of stability. It is the atmospheric pressure of a vacuum, the sound of a leadership that has spent 2 decades building a fortress of perceived invincibility, only to realize that the walls are made of paper and the wind is picking up. Tonight, we have a disconnect. On one side, a podium in Moscow where the statistics are gleaming, the posture is upright, and the narrative is one of inevitable victory. On the other side, a reality in the mud of the Donbass where the gains are measured in inches, the costs are measured in 500,000 lives, and the Great Russian Bear is currently begging North Korea for laborers and old Soviet shells. The question tonight isn't just whether the war is being lost. The question is, when the lie becomes this much bigger than the truth, who is actually left holding the keys to the kingdom? Look at this. Just look at the visual we're seeing out of the Kremlin's year-end press performance. It's December 2025. We are nearly 4 years into a special operation that was supposed to last 72 hours. And there he is, Vladimir Putin, sitting in that gilded hall, telling a hand-picked audience of stenographers that the Russian economy is thriving with a 1% growth rate. He's leaning into the microphone, exuding the practiced calm of a man who believes he has successfully outlasted the West's attention span. But here is the thing about autocracy. The leader's performance is only as strong as the audience's willingness to ignore their own empty cupboard. While the Kremlin broadcasts a message of military Keynesianism, this idea that you can fuel an entire national economy by simply building tanks and blowing them up, the actual ground-level data tells a story of systemic organ failure. To understand where we are right now, you have to look at the numbers the Kremlin doesn't put on the teleprompter. We are tracking reports that the Russian central bank, for the first time in this entire conflict, has begun selling off its physical gold reserves. Think about that. You don't sell the family silver because the farm is doing well. You sell the silver because the creditors are at the door and the harvest is turned to ash. The historical parallels here are not just striking, they are screaming. In 1904, Tsar Nicholas II embarked on what his advisors called a short victorious war against Japan. They thought a quick military triumph would stem the tide of domestic unrest, that it would solidify the Romanov brand for another century. They believed their own propaganda about Russian exceptionalism, but the reality of the battlefield, the logistical incompetence, the technological gap, the sheer hubris of an elite detached from the peasantry shattered the myth. That short, victorious war didn't save the Tsar. It was the precise catalyst for the 1905 revolution, the first crack in the dam that would eventually sweep the entire imperial order into the dustbin of history. Fast forward to today. We are seeing a 2025 version of that same strategic blindness. The Kremlin claims an unemployment rate of 2%, the lowest in history. In a vacuum, that sounds like a miracle. But in the context of a war of attrition, it is a flashing red light. It means there is no one left to work. It means the labor pool has been drained into the trenches or has fled across the borders to escape the draft. It is a full employment of the graveyard. And then there is the human cost. Estimates now place Russian casualties killed or severely maimed at over 790,000. That is not just a military statistic, that is a generational catastrophe. That is nearly 800,000 families who are currently receiving wood memorials or LADA payments instead of sons, husbands, and fathers. But here is the mini reveal that brings this all into focus. The Kremlin isn't just worried about the people who don't come home. They are becoming absolutely terrified of the ones who do. We are seeing leaked internal memos from the security services, the FSB expressing extreme concern about the return of nearly 700,000 veterans from the front lines. Why? Because these are men who were promised glory and given a meat grinder. They are men who have seen the staggering incompetence of their commanders firsthand. They are men who are returning to a country where the economic miracle means they can't afford bread. When an authoritarian leader loses the ability to provide either guns or butter effectively, he usually relies on fear. But when the men who possess the guns no longer fear the man who provides the butter, the arithmetic of power changes overnight. The facade of the monolith is cracking, not from a single blow from the outside, but from the slow, agonizing rot of the foundation itself. And as we move into our next segment, we're going to look at the specific mechanical failure of the Russian military machine, a failure that isn't just about strategy, but about the very nature of how a corrupt, top-down system tries and fails to fight a modern decentralized war. If segment 1 was about the psychological disconnect in the Kremlin, segment 2 is about the physical reality on the ground, the actual tangible breakdown of what was once considered the world's second most powerful military. For decades, the Russian military doctrine was built on the idea of mass. If you have enough tanks, enough artillery, and enough bodies to throw at a problem, you eventually overwhelm the opposition. It's a brutal, simplistic logic. But in 2025, that logic has run headfirst into a technological wall. The data coming out of open source intelligence trackers like Oryx is frankly mind-boggling. We are talking about the confirmed loss of over 23,000 pieces of heavy Russian equipment. That includes more than 4,000 main battle tanks. To put that in perspective, that is more tanks than most NATO countries have in their entire inventories combined. But it's not just that they're losing equipment, it's how they're losing it. The battlefield in Ukraine has become the most transparent combat environment in human history. Because of the ubiquity of unmanned aerial systems drones, the Russian military can no longer mass its forces. The moment a column of tanks tries to assemble for a breakthrough, they are spotted by a $500 drone and targeted by precision artillery within minutes. This has led to a strategic paralysis that the Kremlin is desperately trying to hide. We're seeing Russian advances in places like Pokrovsk and Kupiansk that are measured in millimeters. Literally. The average rate of advance for Russian forces over the last 4 months has been 0.12 kilometers per day. At that rate, it would take them years just to reach the next major city. This is what strategic failure looks like in the 21st century. It's not a dramatic retreat. It's a creeping suicide. It is a leadership that is so committed to the idea of an offensive that they are willing to trade 10,000 lives for a single bombed-out village. And why? Why do they keep doing it? Because in an authoritarian system, loyalty is the only currency that matters. If you are a Russian general and you tell the truth that the offensive is impossible, that the troops are exhausted, that the equipment is refurbished junk from the 1,960 seconds, you don't get a promotion. You get a resignation or you find yourself under investigation for corruption. We've seen this play out with commanders like General Lapin. He's been the ultimate scapegoat for every Russian failure since the start of the war. He gets fired, he gets rehired, he gets blamed, he gets hidden away. It's a game of musical chairs played on a sinking ship. The Kremlin cannot admit that the system is the problem, so they must insist that the people are the problem. But here is the structural rot that is even more dangerous for Putin. The fortress Russia economy is transitioning into what analysts are now calling a cannibal economy. To keep the war machine running, the Kremlin is literally eating its own future. They are stripping funding from education, from healthcare, from infrastructure, and pumping it into defense plants that are doing nothing but refurbishing old T-62 tanks. This is a suicide pact disguised as an industrial policy. By 2025, the Russian defense industry isn't innovating, it's scavenging. They are reliant on microchips pulled from washing machines and shells imported from North Korea. When a superpower has to rely on Kim Jong-un to keep its artillery firing, that isn't a sign of a strategic partnership. That is a sign of a desperate terminal decline. The mini reveal here, the thing that should make everyone sit up and take notice, is the state of the Russian shadow fleet. For 2 years, Russia used a fleet of aging, uninsured tankers to bypass Western oil sanctions. It was their economic lifeline. But over the last few months, Ukraine has begun a campaign of long-range maritime strikes, not just in the Black Sea, but in the Caspian Sea. They are hitting oil rigs and tankers hundreds of miles from the front lines. The Kremlin thought they could keep the war over there in the Donbass, in the border regions. But the war is now coming for the one thing that keeps the regime alive, the oil revenue. If the shadow fleet is neutralized, the cannibal economy runs out of things to eat. And that brings us to the democracy versus authoritarianism lens. In a democracy, when a policy fails this spectacularly, there are mechanisms for correction. There are elections, there is a free press, there is public debate. In an autocracy, there is only escalation. Putin cannot admit he was wrong because his entire claim to power is based on the idea that he is never wrong. He is trapped in a cage of his own making, and the bars are getting tighter every single day. As the military machine grinds to a halt and the economic lifeline begins to fray, the pressure isn't just moving toward the front lines. It's moving toward the center. It's moving toward the inner circle. In our final segment, we're We're going to look at the endgame, the moment when the elite realization of failure turns into a struggle for survival. We have reached the point in the narrative where the big reveal isn't about a hidden document or a secret recording. The big reveal is the gravity of the collapse itself. It is the realization that the Russian state, as it has existed under Vladimir Putin for 25 years, is no longer a functioning entity. It is a hollowed out shell held together by nothing but the momentum of its own past and the fear of what comes next. Think about the geopolitical humiliation we are witnessing. We are seeing reports that Russia is now importing labor from North Korea and China just to keep its factories running. This is the great Russia that was supposed to stand toe-to-toe with the United States and the European Union. Now, it is a vassal state of its own junior partner. It is a country that has traded its sovereignty for a few more months of survival. But the real threat to Putin isn't coming from Washington or Brussels. It's coming from within the very security apparatus that he built to protect himself. For years, the deal with the Russian elite, the Siloviki, was simple. You give me total loyalty, and I give you total stability and wealth. That deal is dead. There is no more stability. The wealth is being liquidated to pay for drones, and the total loyalty is being tested by the reality that the man at the top has led them into a strategic dead end. We are seeing the emergence of a moral vacuum at the heart of the Kremlin. When the ideology of Greater Russia fails to produce results and the economic benefits of the regime disappear, all that is left is raw power. And raw power is a very dangerous thing to hold on to when everyone around you is looking for a way out. The democracy versus authoritarianism struggle is often framed as a battle of ideas. But at its core, it's a battle of resilience. Democracies are